Okay, so this is my first time trying to narrate a video. So hopefully I do this right. So anyways, this is an example of one of my SEL or social emotional learning classes on emotions and mindfulness, which covers the competencies of self-awareness and self-management. And this is geared towards students grades 3 through 6. So let's get into this here. Okay, so first, the introduction, why are we here? We're here to talk about emotions and how they may make us feel, both inside our brains and our bodies. And really, emotions can be comfortable or uncomfortable, which I really like to get that out there because it's important for students to know that emotions, we have a lot of human emotions, and emotions can be positive, they can be negative, they can be comfortable, they can be uncomfortable, but they're all part of what makes us human. So then what I'll do is have the students name some emotions that they can think of, and they love to throw them all out there. So then after we do that, we will move into our first activity, because I like to incorporate a lot of activities and takeaways in my lesson plans, because I really think it helps to solidify those concepts and those ideas and the things that we're teaching and talking about. It helps to help students to retain it a little bit more if they have some sort of activity they can think of whenever those topics might come up again. So the clap it out game, it's really simple. I will divide a class, depending on how big it is, I'll divide them into 2 or 3 separate groups. And then all it is if I call their group, which usually it's A, B, and C. So if I call their group, that group has to clap. So I will start out slow, of course, and then I'll move a little bit faster and keep getting it faster, and then switch it up. It's not always going to be A, B, C. It might be C, B, A, or A and C, and B and C, and A, and I might leave somebody out. So it's just constantly changing. And whenever they hear their group name, they have to clap. Well, it gets faster and slower, confusing, and easier throughout the time that we do it. And the whole lesson to this is, how did that make you feel? So after we're done, I'll ask the students, what emotions were you feeling when we were playing the clap it out game? And a lot of times I'll hear things like, I was excited, but then I got frustrated, or I got angry because Joey wasn't doing it right and he kept messing up our group, and things like that. So we talk a little bit about how our emotions change. They're not always static. Our emotions can fluctuate even in the course of a few minutes, or in a day, or in a week, or in any given situation. We might have joy in one moment and we might be frustrated in another. So then we'll move into the next idea of, well, can we tell what other people are feeling? Do we know what our classmates were feeling when we played the clap it game? And we'll talk a little bit about how we can assume sometimes how people might be feeling, and sometimes they might feel the same way we do, and sometimes they might feel differently than us. But 2 main ways that we know how someone is feeling: by having them maybe tell us, or maybe us asking them how they might be feeling, and then body language. What do we look for with body language? And we're going to get into that in the next activity a little bit deeper. And then we'll talk a little bit about how we can respond to them. What do we do if we see somebody who's angry or upset? Or what do we do if we see somebody who's happy and excited? Or, what do we do if we're not sure? Or if their feelings might differ from our feelings. And then it all falls down to those 3 basic topics of respect, empathy, and kindness. And then we talk a little bit about how each of those words might be defined and how we can apply them. And again, it's different every class, and it's definitely different with each age group. So the conversations really lend themselves to making sure that they're they're appropriate for that grade level and for that group of students, and really opening up that dialogue, because again, we may have students who are coming from different backgrounds or different cultures where these concepts might be a little different. They might look a little different. So not only are we opening up the conversation so that we can understand one another, we're making it okay. We're making it okay for there to be differences, which is such an important concept with social emotional learning. So then we're going to go into our next activity, which is the same reaction activity. And what I'll do is, again, I will take students, I'll take 2 students at a time, and they have to stand up in front of the class back to back. And then what I'll do is I will yell out a prompt of some sort, and they need to respond to that using their emotions. So I might say something like, you're eating ice cream. And then I'll see, the class will see the students pretend to eat ice cream, or they might be happy, they might be smiling. So it's a positive interaction, right? So students are looking at, what facial expressions are they seeing, what verbal cues might they be getting, and what body language are they seeing happening here. And then I'll give, a series of different scenarios. And the students will switch out, so it'll be 2 different students each time. And it might be they might come across something negative. So it might be, okay, your chore after school today is picking up the dog poop in the backyard, and they hate that one. So that one always brings a lot of laughter and a lot of oohs and ahs, but generally the same emotional reaction to, ew, I don't want to do that, it's gross. But then I'll throw in some where they may be different. So I might put in something like pineapple on pizza, and sometimes we'll have some students that like it, some that don't. Or riding roller coasters, one might like it, one might not. I'm going fishing. So just a bunch of different scenarios where there may be the same reactions or there may be different reactions, and we talk about that. What makes us have those same or different reactions. So again, opening that dialogue, that is such an important part of social emotional learning, is being able to talk about these things. So then that brings me into one of our big topics of stress and anxiety, because we know that students today are extremely stressed, especially through the pandemic. We've seen such an uptick in students expressing frustration and anxiety and stressors from not only being at home when we were all isolated, but missing a year of school and then being back and things still aren't normal, and wearing masks and whatever they may be feeling, but might be causing it, but they are all feeling a lot of stress. So we're going to talk about it. It's okay to not be okay. That's a big thing that we like to say a lot in mental health is, acknowledging the fact that you're not okay is not a weakness, it's a strength. So then we'll talk a little bit about, what stresses you out? And I'll encourage the kids to share, what are your stressors? What makes you feel bad? And surprisingly, they all have a lot to say. So we'll talk about that for a while. And then we'll talk about, how do those things make us feel physically? So then we'll talk about, how we might have a test that day and we're getting a headache from it, or maybe we got in trouble at home and so our stomach might, we might have a little bit of a tummy ache today at school, or maybe they had a disagreement with a friend, and now they're embarrassed and they don't know what other people are thinking, so then they're worried. So then we talk about how maybe that might make us feel shaky sometimes, or we might get a little bit sweaty, or our chest might start to pound when we're stressed. So just talking about those physical manifestations of stress, because again, the more we know, the more kids know what's normal and what reactions can happen to these emotions, the better prepared they are. And And I can tell you from my years working in school health, a lot of the times my kiddos that would come down to my clinic, they were students who were stressed out, and their anxiety was because of these stressors, but they were so determined in their minds that they were dying from these headaches and stomach aches, but really it was the stress. So if we can help kids to see that, okay, you know what, I'm stressed out right now, I'm having a lot of anxiety over this issue, this headache I'm experiencing, this stomach ache I'm experiencing, my chest is pounding a little bit, I'm not having a heart attack, I'm not dying. This is just my body responding to the stress. A lot of times it helps kids to come out of it quicker, to be able to calm themselves and re-regulate the way they're feeling. So then we'll go into, well, how do you manage stress? What do you do? And so I'll start the conversation usually by saying, when I get stressed out, I like to get outside and take a walk. Or I like to go shopping. That's my therapy. Or baking. When I bake, it makes me feel better. So then I'll have the kids all share, well, what do you do when you're feeling stress or anxiety? What helps you to feel better? And then we'll talk. And they all have something unique and different to say. It might be drawing, it might be journaling, it might be listening to music or playing video games or crying, and it's all okay. We get to see how one another copes with these situations, and maybe it might help us to have an idea the next time that we're feeling this way that, maybe I can try that technique instead. It works for my friend, maybe it'll work for me too. So then we move into mindfulness, and mindfulness really is that redirecting. So not only are we physically trying to find ways to redirect that stress or that anxiety, but mindfulness helps us to be in the here and now, because a lot of times we know when we're stressed or we're anxious about something, we get wrapped up in the what ifs or the worry of what could happen instead of being in the here and now. So with mindfulness, we use that to create that space between those heavy emotions we might be feeling and the actions that we use to respond to them. So we change it from that reaction to a response. So because a lot of times, if we're angry or we're upset or we're stressed out, we have a tendency to lash out, or we have a tendency to do things that aren't going to help the situation to be better. So if we take that moment to pause and to use mindfulness, we can respond in a more productive way. Because really mindfulness helps us to focus, right? It helps us to feel better emotionally and physically. It takes those stressors down a notch. So some of the techniques we'll go through, because again, giving tangible tools to help with those feelings is so important. So these are some of my favorites. The first one is the 5 senses activity. So when you're feeling stressed or you're upset about something, take that moment of pause to focus on your 5 senses. So 5 things you can see right then and there in the room. 4 things you might be hearing. 3 things that you can touch and how they feel. 2 things you might be smelling, and then 1 thing you might be able to taste in that moment. And that gives that time, that pause, because it takes a little bit of time to think of those things, but it also refocuses your vision and your hearing and your sense of feeling, so that you can take that immediate response time away. You can just take a moment and focus on something else, and then come back to whatever that problem is in the moment, or whatever that feeling is that's just so heavy and so deep and so worrisome, and maybe have a little time to refresh. And then belly breaths, that's a great thing too. And belly breaths are cleansing breaths. We use them in yoga for sure, but you can use them anywhere at any time. This was something I taught my own children, very early on. When they're upset about something, or they're nervous, or they're panicking, take your cleansing breaths. And your cleansing breaths, of course, are going, breathing deeply in through your nose, and then out through your mouth. And typically a set of 5 of them is good. And it helps, again, to calm, because when we take those cleansing breaths, we're actually physically changing our response. It slows our heart rate, it slows our pulse, It slows down our breathing so that that initial panic feeling goes away. Five finger breathing, that technique is very similar to the other two. So the 5-finger breathing is you just take your index finger on one hand and you run it through your fingers on the other hand. So you start at the base of your thumb down by your wrist and just run your index finger up and around your thumb, up and around your index finger, up and around your middle finger, all the way down, and then all the way back. So it's that taking those 10 seconds or so to just kind of regroup. And then, of course, self-guided meditation is also a great technique that I teach usually to my older students. And there's a lot of different ways you can do self-guided meditation, but it's something that can be done very privately wherever you are. So you could be sitting at your desk, you could be sitting on the bus, you could be sitting in the cafeteria, and you could just be sitting there quietly, closing your eyes and, focusing on your breathing, focusing on your body as a whole, and, the relaxation, clenching and then relaxing all of your different muscle groups from head to toe and back. That really just helps to re-regulate us in that moment, to give us that time to calm down, that time to refocus and to realize that, okay, this moment of panic can pass. And then this is probably my favorite activity, and it's the one I get the most positive feedback from my students, especially my older students. Gratitude journaling is something I learned back in my time of learning art therapy, and I really, really think it's a great tool for students to use, or for adults, for all of us, any of us really, because it gives us that time to find that balance in our lives, right? So gratitude journaling can be done anywhere and anytime. I like to encourage students to do it before they need it. So what I'll do in this activity is usually I'll give students a piece of paper, and then what I have them do is write down 5 things that make them feel happy, or 5 things that make them feel supported, things in their life that bring them joy. And they have to write those 5 things on their paper. And then I'll give them the opportunity to share, if they want to, their 5 things. They don't have to. If they don't want to, they can keep it private. But then, I'll encourage kids, take this paper home. Take it home, either pop it in a book, put it in a drawer, create your own full journal if you want to. You can decorate it however you want. You can doodle, you can draw, you can write other things, you can clip out pictures and make a collage, whatever you want to do with it. But even if you just have this paper with these 5 items on it, and you bring it out whenever you're having that day, you're having that moment when things just aren't going right for you, and you're stressed out, and you're worried, and you're overwhelmed, and you just want to cry and break down, take out your gratitude journal, take out your paper with your 5 things on it, and read it. And reflect on it and look at it and remember that, today might have been crappy. It might have been a really bad day, but I've got all these other things in my life that are great. These other things make me happy. These other things are there for me, and they're positives. So that way we have that balance. We remember that, life is not always bad. It's not always good, but it's not always bad. And we can come back to that midline, that sense of normalcy, right? That positive space. And then there's another, sometimes I'll do, this is fun for the younger ones who maybe like a little bit more of arts and crafts. So we do what's called stress catchers, but really it's really just cootie catchers like we had. But inside I encourage them to write things that are positive. Again, those positive things that make them happy, positive memories they may have, just things that bring them joy, so that they can just play with this as a tangible, tactile tool when they're having those moments when they're feeling a little stressed out or upset about things. which usually there isn't. I do like to add a little video. So I have the Storybots video with about emotions, and it's about 10 minutes long. So I don't often have time because kids like to talk a lot, which is good, and I prefer that so much more over to having them just watch the videos. But it is a nice video too for them, especially the younger ones, to kind of see again how emotions affect us and how we might each individually respond to those emotions. So that in a nutshell is my basic social emotional learning class on emotions. And again, those competencies are self-awareness and self-management, 2 of the 5 core competencies for social emotional learning. So really, it's great. It's important that our kiddos get these lessons, that they're able to identify their feelings and to know what to do with them when they become overwhelming. All right, thanks for listening.